In 1976, a Concorde jet landed in Venezuela. Not Paris, not London, Caracas. At the time, this didn't feel strange. It felt inevitable. Venezuela was rich, confident, and untouchable. But today, that same country can't reliably keep supermarket shelves stocked. This isn't a story about ideology. It's a warning about what happens when mathematics finally overrules politics. Most people believe Venezuela collapsed because of bad leaders, corruption, or a failed political system. That explanation is comforting because it suggests this kind of collapse can only happen somewhere else. But it's wrong. Venezuela didn't fail because of politics. It failed because of a mechanical economic disease, one that is now spreading through the world's most advanced economies. If you had walked through the international terminal of Maiquetía Airport in Caracas in 1976, you would have seen something that feels almost unreal today. Sitting on the runway was the Concorde, the ultimate symbol of global status. A supersonic jet reserved for elites, carrying businessmen and politicians from Paris to South America in under 6 hours. At that moment, Venezuela was known as Saudi Venezuela. It had the highest per capita income in Latin America. Its currency, the Bolivar, was so stable that neighboring countries used it as a reserve asset. Its middle class consumed more Scotch whiskey per person than any nation on earth. The national mood was simple. Venezuela had solved economics because it sat on the world's largest proven oil reserves. The laws of gravity no longer applied. They were rich, they were powerful, and they believed it would last forever. Today, Venezuela is the site of the greatest economic collapse in modern history outside a war zone. The economy has contracted by nearly 80%, a destruction of wealth greater than the Great Depression in the United States. More than 7 million people, nearly a quarter of the population, have fled the country. The currency has been redenominated 3 times, stripping away 14 zeros. A single bolivar from the Golden Age would be worth trillions today. The Concorde is long gone, replaced by rusting planes, grounded because the country cannot afford spare parts. When people in the West look at this tragedy, they usually reach for a simple explanation. They call it socialism. That label is comforting because it reassures them that something like this could never happen in the United States, the United Kingdom, or Europe. Our institutions are stronger. Our economies are diversified. Our central banks are independent. That belief is dangerous and possibly fatal. Economists call it fiscal dominance. Fiscal dominance occurs when a government becomes addicted to spending and terrified of the political consequences of austerity, so it quietly conquers its central bank. In a healthy system, the central bank is the adult in the room. Its job is to say no. If politicians want to spend money they don't have, the central bank raises interest rates to stop inflation, forcing discipline or bankruptcy. The separation between the Treasury, which spends, and the central bank, which prints, is the firewall that prevents hyperinflation. Fiscal dominance begins when that firewall breaks. The central bank loses its independence and becomes an extension of the government. Its mission shifts from protecting the currency to keeping the state solvent. When deficits grow too large to fund with taxes or honest borrowing, the central bank is ordered to print the difference. In Venezuela, this process began quietly, years before hyperinflation made headlines. During the oil boom, the state massively expanded its promises. Millions of public sector jobs were created. Food, fuel, and housing were heavily subsidized. Then, in 2014, oil prices collapsed. Revenue disappeared, but spending remained. The deficit surged toward 15% of GDP. A responsible government would have cut spending, raised taxes, and told the public the party was over. Venezuela's leaders chose the painless option instead. They ordered the central bank to create new money. At first, it seemed like magic. Government workers were paid. Pensioners received their checks. The military got raises. The deficit was closed without raising a single tax. But the country was being paid with ghost money, currency backed by no real production, no labor, and no wealth. The result was not immediate hyperinflation, but slow decay. Prices crept upward. Stock markets surged in nominal terms, giving the illusion of prosperity as purchasing power collapsed. By the time ordinary citizens realized the money was broken, escape was no longer possible. This is why Venezuela matters in 2026. Because the same dynamic is now unfolding in the world's largest and most stable economies. The United States is running peacetime deficits of 6 to 7% of GDP, levels once reserved for total war. The national debt is growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. For the first time in history, the U.S. government is spending more on interest payments than on national defense. This marks the onset of fiscal dominance. To pay interest, the government must borrow more. To borrow more, it must issue more bonds. To sell those bonds, it needs buyers. And increasingly, that buyer is the Federal Reserve. Just like Venezuela. The Venezuela Playbook is no longer a historical curiosity. It is becoming the operating manual of the global financial system. The mechanism that destroyed the bolivar is now eroding the dollar, the euro, and the yen. The difference is not the destination, it is the speed. Venezuela crashed in a Ferrari. The West is crashing in a luxury sedan. When inflation finally becomes impossible to ignore, governments rarely admit fault. No leader goes on television to say they printed too much money. Instead, they open the next chapter. Inflation is blamed on greed, on corporations, on speculators and hoarders. In Venezuela, this denial led to price controls. Soldiers were sent into supermarkets armed with price tags, not weapons. Milk was forced to sell below the cost of production. For a brief moment, people celebrated as shelves were cleared. Then farmers stopped producing. Factories shut down. Supply chains collapsed. Price controls did not lower the cost of living. They destroyed supply. Within months, shelves were empty. The nation with the largest oil reserves on Earth ran out of toilet paper. Rather than admit failure, the government doubled down. Food distribution was nationalized. Markets were replaced by ration boxes. Hunger stopped being an economic condition and became a political weapon. At the same time, currency controls strangled the international economy. An official exchange rate was imposed that bore no resemblance to reality. This created one of the largest corruption machines in history. Friends of the regime became rich overnight through arbitrage, while legitimate businesses collapsed because they could not access foreign currency. This was sold as a way to protect the nation. In reality, it ensured no real investment would ever return. The economy didn't disappear, it went underground. Black markets replaced legal ones. Prices became higher, not lower, dangerous, not stable. The collapse didn't end with poverty, it ended with mutation. Today, Caracas exists in two realities. In wealthy districts, luxury cars, designer stores, and dollar-priced restaurants thrive behind armed gates. Just miles away, the middle class, engineers, doctors, professors, scavenge to survive. Hyperinflation does not destroy the rich or the poor. It destroys the middle class, the people who saved, who trusted the system, who did everything right. Their wealth vanished quietly. This is the silent default. To prevent revolt, the state digitized survival. Bonuses replaced wages. Access to food, fuel, and assistance was tied to a smart ID card. Money stopped being a neutral medium of exchange and became a tool of behavioral control. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable for the West, because we are now seeing the same patterns. Asset prices soar for the wealthy. Real wages collapse for everyone else. Inflation is blamed on corporations rather than currency creation. And most dangerously, digital control mechanisms are being introduced as solutions. Stimulus payments condition populations to depend on the state rather than the market. Central banks are rapidly developing digital currencies that allow money to be programmed, restricted, and controlled. The final stage of fiscal dominance is always the same. When citizens try to protect themselves by moving into hard assets, governments close the exits. In 1933, the United States faced a debt crisis and responded by criminalizing gold ownership, forcing citizens to exchange real money for paper that was immediately devalued. Venezuela is not a warning about ideology. It is a warning about arithmetic. When governments spend beyond reality long enough, mathematics always collects. History doesn't repeat itself, it upgrades.